Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about 5 Seconds of Summer again. I know, I'm just excited as you guys are. Remember how in the previous part I said, oh, I'm not gonna get sick, I refuse to get sick. It's flu season and I do not want to get sick. I will not get sick. Well, I got sick. So if my voice is a little weird and a little phlegmy, that's why. I actually have a real light instead of just like the shitty fluorescence that I have in this room now, so hopefully I look slightly better. I'm trying to improve the setup at every given point. Today we're going to talk about Sounds Good Feels Good, which is one of my favorite 5 Seconds of Summer albums. This is when I became a really big, true fan of Five Sauce back in the day, and I followed their every move. So originally I was a bit afraid that I was going to have too much to say in these early sections and then not enough to say later on because I wasn't as big of a fan of them in the later 2010s. But after doing as much research as I could, it seems that they really were just doing a lot more stuff at this time. They were just so much more busy in 2014 and 2015 than they are later on. You would say that they were too busy. I like this background, but the only problem is that there's so many faces, so it keeps focusing on them and not on me. I'm the star of this show. By the way, speaking of the background, does it all make sense now? We've slowly been building up to this, which we're going to talk about a lot, don't worry. Before we talk about that, however, we have to talk about the album. And before we talk about the album, there's a few more things I need to give context for. If you guys know me, you know that I love preamble. Preamble's like my thing. So we're going to talk a lot, I'll be honest, about some of the things that Five Sauce were doing around this time that I think are very interesting and provide a lot of context as to why they were so big, why they had so many fans, and possibly why Sounds Good Feels Good, in retrospect, was considered a commercial and critical failure, according to Ashton in the 10-year anniversary podcast thing they did.
We still had people telling us.
Yeah, they told us it was a critical commercial failure.
Yeah.
Which was...
Ooh.
I remember in 2021, people were freaking out when this episode dropped. People were saying, how dare the record labels call this a critical and commercial flop? This is a great album. It's one of their best albums. I cannot believe they would think it's so bad. And it's like, I agree with you guys. I think it's a really good album. I like this era and this album a lot. But I really want to unpack that statement because I fully believe when they say that, the record labels that is, that they truly believe it. Because, I mean, technically, yes. Five Sauce are definitely a lot more quiet now when it comes to their career and, publicity. And that's honestly for a good thing, in my opinion. No one needs this level of stardom and fame and pressure put on them. So the fact that the album did just as good and not even better than their current albums, yet was considered a flop, is something I want to unpack, and I think it's something that is very interesting. And I get it. I understand why they would have said that. So, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. So, first preamble of the video is going to be me talking about social media. Because Five Sauce, at the end of the day, were big social media stars. Yes, plenty of bands and artists had become popular through the internet before with websites like MySpace, but I would argue that Five Sauce are one of the first ever bands to really do so in the social media age of the internet. Of course, they started uploading covers on YouTube, which is how they got their initial fan base and recognition from record labels, but they were also extremely active on social media, engaging with their fans on a pretty much daily basis. And I don't know if I should give full credit to Five Sauce for this, because I'm pretty sure other bands were doing this at the same time, but for me, I think I see it as a big, big part of their success in these early years. And even to their success to this day. I feel like I don't need to explain how they used Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and I guess now TikTok, because I think everyone understands how celebrities and musicians use those platforms now, because everyone does it. So the two I'm going to explain are the two defunct ones, and those two are YouNow and Keek. We're finally talking about Keek, guys. I'm going to start with Keek because it's the one I understand more, and also because I think it's less known than YouNow is, although YouNow's still pretty unknown to the modern day people. So the best way I can describe Keek is as a mixture between Instagram videos at the time, Vine, and I guess what would later become Musical.ly in TikTok. Something about Vine that people I think kind of forget, because a lot of the most famous Vines and the ones that have been archived were like well-constructed jokes with interesting, developments and stuff. But a lot of what Vine was people just pulling out their phones and recording 6 seconds of their life and then just uploading it, because social media was not like a place to perform as much for everyday people. And I think Five Sauce used social media, or were positioning themselves as looking like they used social media like everyday people would. I honestly get kind of uncomfortable when I watch some of these old Five Sauce videos, because they truly just feel like somebody's like home videos of like a privated Instagram account that I really shouldn't be looking at. Like looking at a stranger's social media page and they're not performing, it's just something they do for fun, is very odd. I feel like we've all kind of accidentally fallen down a rabbit hole like that at some point, and that's what it genuinely feels like when I watch these videos, because it really just feels like they're just everyday people and I shouldn't be seeing these. But it was clear from the very beginning that their management did tell them to make these videos and tweet and post on social media as much as possible, because they knew that fan interaction was going to get the diehards, and I mean, it did. I don't know much about One Direction. I think I've already made that clear. But One Direction also, I'm pretty sure, did the same method. So I think it was a mixture of Modest management knowing how to do the social media game, because they were both under that management. And also because Five Sauce were already kind of used to posting on social media because they had already done so. So to explain what Keek is, it pretty much was a app where you could record vertical 1-minute videos of yourself, and you could pause and you could flip the camera from front to back, but that was about it. That's literally all you could do. It was seen as less performative than Instagram, but also less staged than Vine. It pretty much was the social media equivalent of like what later people would use Snapchat and Instagram stories for. My fridge is making that sound again. I am so sorry about my fridge making this noise. I can't shut it up. I apologize. How I understand it is that Keek was supposed to be like Instagram and YouTube mixed together, because 1-minute videos were seen as very novel and short, but not as short as 6 seconds, so you could do a little more in them. And they were vertical, so they were like easier to use on your phone than YouTube videos were. It really doesn't feel that important in the modern day, because so many different social media apps did what Keek does, so no wonder it went defunct pretty soon. There's literally nothing on the internet about Keek for whatever reason. It doesn't seem to be well remembered at all. If celebrities like Halsey and Five Sauce didn't use it, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just completely wiped from the internet. The Wikipedia page is shit, and the desktop version of the app was always shit, so on the Wayback Machine it's even shittier. And the reason why I feel like it's such a big deal that we can't access Keek in the modern day, like the same way you can't access Vine anymore, is because I think a lot of Five Sauce Keeks have not been preserved and have been lost to time. They're considered lost media. I don't think a lot of people actually had Keek. So Five Sauce using it didn't encourage people to make Keek accounts, because I remember there being whole Instagram pages and whole Twitter pages dedicated to just re-uploading the videos they posted on there, and that's how I saw most of them. Specifically in 2014, someone uploaded a 3-part series of all of the Keeks they had made from the beginning of their account up to that point in time, which I think was like in the middle of the year. So luckily we have a lot of the Keeks from when they were most active on the app. However, this is completely partially speculation and also something I'm not too sure about. However, I'm not too sure when they stopped posting on Keek. My theory is December of 2015, because that's kind of what I vaguely remember from my teenage brain. So there's probably like a year's worth of Keeks that we don't have access to anymore, although, like I said, with the tinfoil hat on, I don't think they were as active on social media in 2015 as they were the year prior. There. We're going to get into the why in more detail, but to give like a brief summary, I think the reason why they weren't as active on social media in 2015 is because they were hitting the sauce a little too hard, and they were busy writing the album. And unlike the previous year, I think this album's creation was under a lot more stress than the previous one. I mean, they made a whole album in 3 months versus 2 years, like with the previous one. So they weren't doing as much filming of themselves for Instagram or whatever. And to get more into the live streaming aspect of them, they mainly live streamed on YouNow, which, for those who don't know, because it's a bit defunct now, was basically the just chatting section of Twitch. Because back then, Twitch only allowed video game live streams to be played on their website. So they would mainly do live streams on YouNow. Again, people mainly do live streams on either Twitch or Instagram Live, TikTok Live, you name it. Everything was very separated back then, is what's becoming very obvious through this analysis. But they would do these live streams, and they were very low stakes. There wasn't a lot of setup or things to do. They mainly just sat on a couch and read the comments and answered questions, or just had banter with each other. A lot of the full live streams are not really available to watch nowadays, but I think that's fine because there's not really a lot of interesting material in these live streams, and I think they would agree with me on that. A lot of compilations that came out at the time do exist, so those are good encapsulations of like the best moments of these live streams, especially since there aren't full recordings of these live streams, so I would check those out. There are some pretty iconic moments that happen on these live streams. My favorite one being the "You have pink hair."
You know what? Fuck you guys, I'm leaving too!
Hey, don't swear!
I do what I want, I'm punk rock.
No, you're not. Because you're wearing eyeliner doesn't mean you're punk rock.
You have pink hair.
Oh, fuck you.
Stop swearing.
I do what I want, I'm punk rock. It's such a funny moment. Anyways. And see, this was a way to endear them as people to their fan base. And it was relatively free. They didn't have to have a TV show like S Club 7 or BTR. And they didn't need to exclusively rely on TV interviews, podcast or radio shows, and magazine covers. Because if there's one thing that they were vocal about at that time, it's that they hated all of the questions they were getting asked on these radio shows. Because they were usually pretty boring crap like, who's your celebrity crush? Again, referred to the Rolling Stone article for a comment like that. Also, they were making a documentary, so that can be the reason why. Speaking of, let's talk about the documentary. Preamble number 2. This is the 5 Sauce documentary that came out in late 2015 called How Did We End Up Here? Live at Wembley Arena. I bought this online at Target the week that it came out. I don't know how common the DVD copies of this movie are. There are probably some ways you can access it online. I know there used to be YouTube uploads of it, but I think they've now been taken down. But yeah, this is a great little piece of 5 Sauce merch to have. It's kind of embarrassing how much 5 Sauce merch I have in retrospect. Like this t-shirt, I bought this in 2016. Can you guys see it? It didn't even fit me when I bought it back then, so it definitely doesn't fit me now, which is why we're so up close and personal. So yes, the documentary came out. I wanted to talk about this in the previous section, so the previous video or the previous time I recorded, but that recording session was a bit of a nightmare, and honestly, so is this one. This is literally the only time I have to record this. I am so busy for some reason around this time, and I'm like, I need to get this video out. Sounds Good Feels Good was already out by the time this dropped for like a month, but this really covers the previous era. There's a lot of overlap between the two eras at this time because of how overworked they were. I was going to get into it a little bit more, but the Rock Out With Your Socks Out tour went until after they had released Sounds Good Feels Good, so they were still having to play their old set list from their previous album by the time the new one was out. Like, there was just complete overlap between what they were doing at this time. Nowadays, it's like you at least get 6 months of like nothing and like 6 months of, no new extra stuff happening in between albums, so you can have some breather room between touring and stuff to like make a new set list. But no, at this time, we were still in the self-titled era and the Sounds Good Feels Good era at the exact same fucking time. So yes, this goes into the band's history up until this point, and much like the My Chemical Romance documentary, Life on the Murder Scene, it stops right before they get very interesting and start making one of their more remembered albums with Life on the Murder Scene. I also have that. Wait, shit. I gotta prove I'm a real emo. Yeah, peep that. Japanese exclusive. Don't you wish you were me? Probably not, because it's region locked, so I can't play it on any of my DVD players. But I own it at least. Just gotta get a region-free DVD player soon. Life on the Murder Scene ends with them starting to write The Black Parade, which is, of course, the biggest album of theirs. How Did We End Up Here stopped recording after the drop of She's Kinda Hot, so we do get, like, details of them writing the album, but we don't see the actual, like, release of the album like we did for the first album on here. Anyways, the documentary covers a lot of the information that I've already covered, so if you found my amusing commentary interesting, then maybe you don't need to watch the documentary, although I would recommend. It's a really great live performance intercut between. Although you should also watch just the live performance, which I don't think is available online anywhere. It is on the DVD, however, because the documentary chops and screws the shit out of this live performance to fit its own desires. But a big thing that this movie does is kind of highlight the 4 personalities that they had assigned to this band. This has been the case for boy bands all throughout history, so it's not new that this happened to Five Sauce, but I guess it's new in the sense that, like, I'm not used to seeing it in the bands that I follow. Usually this is more of a fan-created thing, of, like, fans simplifying and dumbing down these real-life people so they can use them in their fanfic and stuff. Not to say that fanfic is bad, I don't think it's bad at all. Real person fanfic is just like its own can of worms that I'm not going to get into, although there was a lot of Five Sauce fanfic written, specifically with them interacting with each other, or some self-insert YA character. It doesn't matter. I didn't want to get into fanfic, I just wanted to clarify that this happens a lot in a lot of bands. But something that I'm pretty sure the marketing team very much put a lot of emphasis on was giving each member their own obvious call-out personality so that girls or people who were fans of them at home could associate themselves with one of them. Pick their favorite. Back in the day, we used to call this lanes, like, are you in Ashton's lane or are you in Michael's lane? Now I think the K-pop fandom calls them, like, bias, like, who's your bias? I don't know anything about K-pop, trust me. But yeah, they would construct specific personalities for these real-life people so you could associate with a certain member and then buy their merch. I'm pretty sure this was, like, heavy with One Direction, and in a lot of ways didn't represent who they were as real people, so they kind of felt like they were playing, like, fake versions of themselves. It's funny that YouTubers ended up doing this to themselves on accident. Like, they reinvented the toxic, like, Hollywood mechanism from the comfort of their own homes. But the 4 personalities are a bit on display in this documentary. Not as much in retrospect. I feel like I really felt it when I first watched it. I was like, why are they portraying these people as, like, TV show characters you could be interested in? I guess BTR is a good example because it literally was a TV show. Like, you have the smart one, the leader, the hot one, and then the dumb one. And then in S Club 7, you had the dumb one, 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 and the dumb one. Sorry, I stole that joke from Todd in the Shadows. Now, let's play a fun little guessing game in the comments below where we try and decide who my favorite member of Five Sauce was back in 2015. As a hint, my birthday is November 20th. I'm not joking. Let's move on. Okay? I don't want to talk about it. But besides that, the documentary works pretty well at giving a very easy to understand overview of Five Sauce in the early years. There's also a lot of really great footage in there. I'm going to try and use some of it while avoiding copyright. Yeah, it's a good time. Check it out if you can, but it's actually not that necessary, although I do recommend watching this band live. Preamble number 3. This band is really great live, and they are an amazing live show, and that was something they were really, really emphasizing at the time. They loved playing live shows, they loved performing on stage, and something that they really worked on was making music that they would want to perform on stage and tour with. And that seems to still be a big deal for the band even to this day. So I really recommend watching some live videos from this time in 2014 and 2015. Because even though they are so young and they will become even better performers as time goes on, they put on a really, really good live show. I cannot believe 5 Seconds of Summer had me actually feeling sad that I didn't see One Direction live back in 2013, because the set list they had for that tour sounded really awesome, honestly. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I really hope not. This is the problem with living in a dorm, is that, like, every 5 minutes there's, like, a bunch of drunk guys yelling underneath your window when you have it open because it's hot as balls in here because there's no air conditioning, and then people rev their motorcycles in the parking lot because they think they're trying to have a dick-waving contest with everybody or something. And the shitty-ass mini fridge that came with the dorm, even though you're very grateful that you didn't have to buy your own, makes the loudest fucking noise in all of history every, like, 10 goddamn minutes, so it ruins your shoot. They also just performed live a lot at this time. They did so many fucking shows. You can find like 30 different recorded videos of them performing any song from this era. Even the ones that like weren't, like they're not really associated with. Like What I Like About You. They performed that song so fucking much just because they performed so fucking much during this time. So the Wembley Arena performance would be a good one to see live, although this is the one where Michael burnt half his face off. They had pyrotechnics for this tour, and Michael stood right in front of like the fire cannon, and it just like burned all of his fringe off. Truly one of the worst things that could happen to any emo. They give each member their own like little talking head section where like you get to learn about them, and most of Michael's is spent on this injury that he had, which makes sense because yeah, it is kind of amazing that they happened to be filming a documentary when something like that happened, so they have plenty of footage of it. But also it's like I would have liked to, seen some more about him as a person, because he only got like half of what everyone else did because of the injury. But that's at the very last song of the show, so like all of the show they're still kicking it and performing it. So yeah, check it out, it's quite good. I almost forgot to do this preamble, so let's get into You Suck, because why not? So in 2013, Michael Clifford and actor Abigail Breslin went on a date. Because they were both celebrities, of course this was papped like crazy, but then we didn't hear anything else after. They went on one date and then that's it. Pretty common for a bunch of teenagers. But then in late 2014, Abigail Breslin decided to do a music career, which is great. I'm glad she's interested in music. Can't wait to hear what she has planned. It's a song called You Suck. It is very, very not subtly about Michael Clifford. And I don't like the song. It is very, very not subtly about Michael Clifford. And that's a bit weird, right? For your first song to be a diss track, and for the fact that they didn't even really date as far as we know. Again, just because this one moment was papped, it doesn't mean that, like, they didn't see each other at all at any time after that, or before even. And also, you'd think for her first ever song, she would drop something that, like, proves her as an artist and not just like a diss track against another musician. Because in the field of music, I think Michael Clifford is a lot more known than Abigail Breslin because she was an actor. So this was absolutely torn to shreds. If you were on the internet and you were at any way like interacting with Five Sauce fan material, it was brutal. It was a bloodbath. People weren't like mean to her, but they did make fun of her a lot. I mean, there were probably some people sending death threats, but like, that's never cool. Just don't do that. People were calling her Abigail Breadstick. You didn't even need to post a caption or anything, just a stock image of a breadstick, and people would fucking lose their minds and give it like 10,000 likes. And of course, because Five Sauce were doing a very extensive press run, like right as this happened, they did like 3 different radio shows in one day, like within the week. Of course, they were asked about it.
Thank you.
The
very
first
much.
tattoo was actually the one on his arm, by the way.
Was it the rings?
No, it was
To the moon.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Featured
I
in
hate
his,
that dumb tattoo.
Okay.
Really?
1D Boys just got ink at.
I've got a question.
Whatever that means.
Michael, look, something's happened in the past 24 hours. I'm not happy about it.
Oh yeah, me.
Because girl to girl, I ain't afraid to get physical. Because I'm a girl, she's a girl.
I actually co-wrote
I think
that
you know where
song.
I'm going with this. If some girl disrespects one of my fellas, I'm going to get up in her grill. I am 3/4 Lebo, so I'll get on a plane.
I don't think she'll know what that means.
Hey,
Abigail.
She's a what?
What's the go? Have you called this girl and been like, "Oi, what are you doing?" Like the song is horrendous.
I have not. I haven't spoken to her in a year, so I was a little bit like, whoa,
Yeah.
what is this?
But from just a pure musicality point of view, like, it's truly
Amazing.
It's
It's amazing.
Really
It's
amazing.
incredible.
yeah. Look, it was just not great musically. Like, if it was a good song, like an Ed Sheeran, don't applaud it.
Yeah.
But it was bad. Well, it was bad. Abigail,
I
if you're
feel like
watching,
someone should have told her.
No,
It's a
no
shit
comment.
song.
Bad now.
no.
She's
So no
definitely
contact. You're just
watching.
gonna leave it.
I don't know what to say about it.
I reckon she's watching
I'm
someone.
just gonna listen to Mariah Carey.
Yeah. And continue your tweets.
I'm gonna provide the clips for you if you're interested. because they're very interesting and very enlightening. I really don't like that a grown-ass woman threatened to beat up this young child, on behalf of the other young child. Very uncomfortable. Anyways, I think this incident, the You Suck incident, really showed that there was going to be more controversy going forward. This was a small taste of a much bigger moment that was going to happen just a year later. But we'll get to that at the end of the video. How does that sound? So when they opened for One Direction again, that ended in October of 2014. So from October of 2014 to July of 2015, things were relatively quiet. In December, of course, they dropped Live Sauce, so they were doing some promotion for that, but that was when they were recording the second album. It apparently took them around 3 months to make this record, and they were living in this big old house that cost them way too much money, apparently. So on July 15th, 2015, they decided to do a live stream. Cool, Five Sauce are doing a live stream. They do these all the time, although this live stream was of a brick wall. And then eventually a man showed up and started spray painting the brick wall. And then 3 hours later, it was the album art for She's Kinda Hot, which was supposed to come out in early August. There were plenty of jokes and now dated memes about this thing that happened because people thought it was fucking hilarious that they sat there for 3 hours to watch a guy paint a wall. I did watch this live stream. I was an edgy tween at this point, but I had to go to like one of my younger cousin's birthday parties, which is at Chuck E. Cheese. So I was like the only one who was not a toddler, just sitting there eating shitty pizza, trying to enjoy my Diet Dr. Pepper. And I'm just staring at my phone with my headphones in, freaking out, watching a man spray paint a wall, being like, what is happening? Just praying that it was something interesting happening with Five Sauce. And I mean, it was. They were dropping a new song. And it was actually an EP. Five Sauce dropped the She's Kinda Hot EP. The She's Kinda Hot music video dropped August 3rd, 2015, and I'm pretty sure the EP came a little bit after that. The EP was not released in America, by the way, and this is another conspiracy moment. I have distinct memories of Michael responding to somebody on Twitter who said, I live in America, so I can't listen to the She's Kinda Hot EP, what do I do? And him saying, bootleg it, pirate it, just listen to the music any way you can. So that's exactly what I did. I really hope the authorities don't use this as evidence and send me to jail. I actually do have a CD of the She's Kinda Hot EP, but I don't have it with me. I have it in a box collecting dust at my dad's house because I want to keep it safe because it's one of my rare collectibles. I'm pretty sure I bought it from Australia because, again, the EP wasn't released in America. You couldn't even listen to the EP on streaming until much later, which is a shame because literally one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite Five Sauce song, is on this EP. So let's talk about the track list. Of course, we have the title track, She's Kinda Hot, which I'll talk about when we talk about the album because it'll make more sense when I talk about it there. So let's talk about the non-album tracks. So the first song is Broken Pieces, which the only thing I really have to say is that this song will have a lot more payoff with a song in the next album that they release. It's about somebody who you used to be dating who just packs up and leaves without even telling you, ghosting you, if you will. And how you still want to try and make the relationship work and put together the broken pieces. The EP does a good job of picking 4 tracks that all feel very indicative of the sound they want to be perceived as making in the future, which is pop punk, very similar to stuff that All Time Low was doing at the time. And All Time Low seems like too obvious of an example to use, but there really were no other bands in the mid to late 2010s doing this sound anymore. I guess other bands you might compare were like Moose Blood, maybe Neck Deep, Citizen. If you were listening to like a mix of any of those artists around this time, these songs I think would have fit perfectly within there. Maybe they were a little more pop sheened than you would expect, but they would fit pretty well. Over and Out is literally one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Five Sauce song. Spoiler alert, I guess. They were clearly very inspired by a lot of emo-core and the sound that the East Coast of America really had in the rock scene from the late 90s to the early 2000s. I guess I could just say Rites of Spring and Bayside, but that's where I hear a lot of the inspirations from. And it's honestly just such a phenomenal track. I could spend a whole video just talking about Over and Out, but I won't. I might get more into it later if I do a top 10 Five Sauce songs. Who knows? We'll see. The song is exclusively Michael and Callum with a little bit of Luke sprinkled in there. It's clear that they know their strengths as vocalists and what they provide within the band, and then they use those strengths accordingly. Like, they knew that at the time, Michael and Callum had the best vocals fitted for something a little more edgy like this, something with a darker tone. So they used them mainly for the vocals. And then Luke works really well with his very clean, very pop-sounding vocals to contrast that, to add some texture to the track. I'll talk more about this when I talk about Sounds Good, Feels Good. Lost in Reality is the final track, and again, I think it's really cute. It is extremely all-time low inspired, in my opinion, even down to using random people's names. I never did find out who Haley was, but oh well. I just think in general, this song does remind me a lot of their older projects. If this was, recorded earlier in the timeline, maybe it could have been on the self-titled album. But this was clearly them, phasing out this style of writing. I can see a lot of the trends of the 2010s starting to fade from their collective conscious of writing music. Although, trust me, there are still plenty of trends in this album. We'll get there when we get there. But yeah, I think Lost in Reality is a great track, and it's a good kind of middle point in between the self-titled era sound and what Sounds Good Feels Good is going to sound like. Again, Michael and Luke have such contrasting vocals around this time that putting them up against each other, placing their vocals right next to each other when they switch off, gives such a unique and dynamic sound to all of their music. Also, this song has a guitar solo. I love a fun little guitar solo, no matter how simple it may be. I guess to just reiterate what I've already said so far, all of these songs are very dynamic, very interesting, very unique, and they don't work for Sounds Good Feels Good. Like, they don't fit on the album, which means it's perfect for an EP like this. They didn't release any other EPs with singles like they did with the previous album. It was just this one, and that was a very, very smart decision in my opinion. Devil Fridge is back to say hello, but as I was saying, the EP shows you that they're going to lean more into this 2010s pop-punk sound, while still leaving more room to make you think and speculate what the album is going to sound like. Because the album does sound a little bit different than this EP does. I mean, it better. So yes, good job. They're getting better at constructing songs. I'm holding my mouse in my hand. You can see that they're clearly getting better at picking songs that work right next to each other and within each other, and constructing a sonic palette instead of just vomiting a bunch of tracks you wrote over 2 years onto a list and being like, we did it, we did an album. A big problem a lot of people have with pop albums is that they don't have a real sonic driven focus, and that it's just like the singles and then it's some deep cuts because you need an album. And I think they are moving away from that and doing what a lot of other really great pop albums do, which is give you a specific feeling, vibe, moment in time, I guess, and really encapsulating who they were as people and as artists at the time in a very cohesive sort of way. Doing movements with my hands to show I'm serious. So let's talk about the album, why don't we? I bought this can so I could use it in my video about Zeke and Luther, which I'm simultaneously recording while I'm doing this one. So if that video is already out on the channel, check it out. So as I've already established, this video has been a long time in the making, yet I still don't know how I'm going to talk about Sounds Good, Feels Good. Here it is, and yes, of course I have the Michael one. I don't want to talk about it. The reason why I have to hold it like this is because the case is extremely cracked and broken. I don't know if you can see that, but here. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just absolutely smashed. I wrecked this jewel case. This is one of my oldest CDs. It's one of the first CDs I ever got, along with my copy of The Black Parade. I'm pretty sure I got these in the same year. I would bring out my copy of The Black Parade, but it is so crunched that I'm afraid it'll fall apart if I even touch it right now. I have to buy another copy at some point. This thing was so sacred to me. I carried it literally everywhere I went. I kept it in my pocket. I didn't even have a Walkman at the time, so I just brought it around with me just because I could. Just because I wanted to. I had no way to actually listen to the music on here. Five Sauce are the reason why I have a Spotify account. I wanted to listen to this album the day that it dropped, and I was still accruing the funds so I could buy this thing. because obviously I had to get the Target exclusive with the special cover and the 2 bonus tracks on the back. So I downloaded the Spotify app that night and listened to the album, probably only like half of it on shuffle. So I really didn't get the best, great first album listening experience, but it was really important to me that I was able to listen to the album that night when it dropped, because that was really the first time I'd ever done that, and they were still promoting this album through fucking CDs and shit. Like, they didn't know how streaming works. Streaming was a very brand new thing at this point. I was deep in standum when this happened. The She's Kinda Hot music video, I was literally in a cornfield in Kansas when it dropped with no internet connection, and I was desperately trying to download the video onto my phone so I could watch it over and over again. Why I was in a cornfield in Kansas is none of your business. It's because I was going to a family wedding, okay? So yeah, needless to say, I was in pretty deep at this point in the Five Sauce fam. So there is a lot of bias in why I love this album so much. There's been plenty of research done about how music that people really love and attach themselves to happened to be the music they listened to when they were ages 12 to 14. And I was ages 12 to 14 when this thing came out, so of course I have an intense bias towards it. But it's not like I've never criticized this thing, and I am going to, try at least to be very fair and reasonable with my analysis. I've basically done a full 180 on this thing. Back in the day, I used to say, well, the first 5 tracks are good, but the rest you can pretty much skip. But now I feel the exact opposite. The first 5 tracks, while great and working really well, really do give that same energy that the self-titled album did. Here are 5 random songs that we're just going to put at the top because we think they're the ones that need to be on the album. I mean, Jet Black Heart is track number 5, and it is literal genius, one of their best songs ever. The rest of the album is where it gets really interesting, and where you really get something fun and new and unique, and something that is wholly Five Sauce. I don't think any other band could make an album like this. So Money is the explosive intro, and it is also a huge troll. They're talking very quietly at the beginning of this album. The volume is very low, so you crank up the volume so you can hear what they're saying, and then they blast you with this huge wall of sound. And also, the song is just mixed louder than the rest of the songs on the album. Like, it literally, if you leave the volume at the same level, the next song just sounds less loud. So they really were just saying the big fuck you at the beginning of this record, I guess. Money's the kind of track to where if you were looking for emotional complexity for this band, you weren't going to find it, and it was probably what's going to make you not want to listen to this album or not like it. But if you were looking for them to prove themselves as true pop punkers, then I guess it does the job fine enough. So let's now talk about She's Kinda Hot. Now, this was actually a pretty big single. I'll put on the screen when it debuted on the Billboard Hot 100 because I'm too lazy and too tired to look it up right now. But it was actually a decently well-charting hit in 2015. Which is kind of weird, right? I went on my whole 2014 pop music rant in the previous section. I had even more to say on that topic that I cut out. If anyone's interested in that, maybe I'll upload like an extended version that only like a few people could see or something. I don't know. It really sounds nothing like 2015 pop music, which is also another transition period. I feel like people understand what pop music sounded like post 2016, and they know what it sounded like pre-2014. So the years of 2014 and 2015 are unique, and it makes sense why a band like Five Sauce were able to be successful during those years. Not because big artists weren't releasing big albums at the time. I mean, Taylor Swift and Katy Perry both dropped records around this time. But no one really knew what the sound going forward was going to be now that club music was starting to take a back seat. I mean, yes, things were very bubblegum, like I've said already, but they didn't know if it was going to lean more into that or get into that more alternative sound that Lorde had introduced. Spoiler alert, it was the latter. The Five Sauce were able to kind of wriggle their way in and kind of play both fields of both like the fun radio pop and also the more alternative sound. And a big problem you'll start to see with them going forward is that people want them to pick a side. And a lot of people thought they're not doing either good, so they should just pick one and stick to it. So that'll be like a topic we'll delve into more as the video goes on. So this album... No, my CD. What happened? Not the other piece. Shit. Like, guess I'll just be holding the booklet because my fucking jewel case actually fell apart in front of my goddamn eyes. I definitely feel like one of the central themes of the album is trying to figure out where they lie within their own music, within their own fandom, within the world in general. I mean, they got one foot in the golden light and one foot in the gutter. So She's Kinda Hot is definitely a lot more heavy than She Looks So Perfect. A common joke that the fans made at the time is that their songs were just gonna get more and more less infatuated with this supposed girl as they went on, because it went from She Looks So Perfect to She's Kinda Hot, so then the third single would have been She's Just Okay. I still don't know why it's called She's Kinda Hot. That first verse really just feels like clickbait, because it's like the first verse is like, my girlfriend's bitching because I always sleep in, which is such a crazy way to start a song, can I just say. I feel like we don't think about that often, that they started the song with, my girlfriend's bitching because I always sleep in. People freaked out that they were swearing on their lead track because, I mean, especially back then, like, swearing wasn't as popular in songs because they had to be censored for the radio. So a lot of songs that they knew were being made for the radio were just pre-censored already. That's how you get that joke of people going like, shh, in their songs. It was seen as like this real edgy statement that the first line they said in their first lead-off single that was introducing people to the album was, my girlfriend's bitching because I always sleep in. But, like, what does that have to do with the rest of the song, now that I think about it? The rest of the song is about not fitting in and not feeling like you have a place in life, and that otherness is what then connects a group of people. This whole thing called the New Broken Scene, which they had kind of invented around this time as a sort of mantra for this group of misfits or whatever. The heart safety pin, which is on the album cover and is just like splattered all over all the material for this, is kind of like the symbol of the New Broken Scene. They also have many songs that like represent this visual image. So I think it's a good effort in like visual storytelling, connecting certain iconography with the music itself. A lot of really great albums do that kind of thing. Like 1989 with Taylor Swift and like the Polaroid picture and the red lip. Like it iconography works when you attach it properly to a certain song. So I guess the first verse about your therapist and your girlfriend being kind of hot even though they're really annoying is supposed to kind of play into this theme of like otherness, like you feel outcasted by these two people in your life. It's kind of a stretch. Honestly, I think they just wanted to start the song with my girlfriend's bitching because I always sleep in. Also, it has a different song structure than your average pop song would. It does the verse, and then it does a breakdown, and then it does another verse, and then it does a chorus, then another breakdown, and then another chorus, and then that's the end of the song. Again, it really seems like they're going for this sort of radio edginess, if you know what I mean. But they're not going at it from a more R&B perspective, like what a lot of teen stars aging into their maturity did, like Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake, but they're doing it in a more rock sense. That's clearly what the management were trying to do. It seems like Five Sauce really wanted to make a rock record, something a little more heavy and with not many obvious singles, and the management went, well, what the fuck are we supposed to do with this thing then? So then they decided to twist it into the bad boy push, like this is Five Sauce in their bangers era or something.
I think this record for us was sort of like, okay, we did kind of the poppier side of stuff on the last record. So let's make a record like an actual band. And let's play fucking everything. Let's just get in a room, write it, and just like not care about like any sort of like pop connotations. Let's just write the music that we want to play live.
I really hope something like this starts to make more sense once realizing that. And also, She's Kinda Hot as a whole. They are trying to be provocateurs, trying to get album sales off of navel gazing alone. Well, I don't think Five Sauce are doing that, but I think the management is. There is a lot of underlying anger on this record, and not in the way you'd think. Of course, there's a lot of relationship frustration on a lot of these tracks. I'm pretty sure that's what Catch Fire is about. There's lots of sadness with both the relationship being over and just in general. I mean, you have The Girl Who Cried Wolf and you also have Jet Black Heart. Jet Black Heart is one of the best songs they've ever written. It is genuinely a masterpiece. And it is the big song that everyone who reviewed the album quoted as like what they were hoping Five Sauce would do further in their career. I think one of my favorite Five Sauce isms is a song where it sounds like it can be about a girl, but it also can be about your own relationship with yourself or your relationship with your audience even. I think that works a whole lot better when they're trying to write about something that's not love rather than the very obvious songwriting they do on a lot of these songs. For example, Hey Everybody, which was also a single, and man, is it not single worthy. It's a great song, it's a great deep cut, it samples Duran Duran. I understand why they made it a single. Purely based on that sample alone, I could see why, because it would get people to sing along. And also, sampling is very common in pop music. But you want to know where sampling is not common and honestly ostracized in? You don't want to know what genre that is? In rock music. They don't understand what sampling is over there, okay? People were confused, upset, even angry when they heard Hey Everybody and thought that they were stealing from Duran Duran or that they were unoriginal assholes. You would think I'm making a big deal out of this for no reason, but it truly was like a problem. They talk about it in the Howard Stern interview. So people within the alternative and rock scenes don't understand sampling, or at least they didn't understand sampling back in the mid-2010s. It's all about authenticity and being real, which is bullshit. We already talked about that in the first section. So to a lot of uneducated folk, sampling is just stealing. And they very clearly flip the bass line from Hungry Like the Wolf into a very different song, and it becomes its own thing. I mean, personally, I would like it if, like, the riff was being referenced in a certain way, like you picked that song specifically to mean something for the song, but, like, that doesn't need to be the case. And even though a pop audience would understand the sampling in Hey Everybody, they weren't going to play this on the radio because it just doesn't sound like what 2015 pop music sounds like. You want to know what the big sound of 2015 was? The sound that was invented then and then became the sound of music for the next few years? Tropical EDM. People wanted to listen to Work by Rihanna or Cheerleader by OMI. They were not going to listen to Duran Duran samples, okay? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, Hey Everybody was a flop single, but you can't really blame anybody for that. It shouldn't have been a single in the first place. I think it's a great song for the album. It's placed in a really great spot, and I think it being so bass heavy lends itself to a different sound for Five Sauce at this time. One thing you'll notice about this album is that you can actually fucking hear the bass on the tracks. The mixing for the first album was so goddamn dry that it was like, why did you even have a bass player? Can't even hear what the fuck he's doing in the background. You can hear a lot more interesting bass lines in this album, and that's truly a great improvement that I love to see. The drumming is still absolutely amazing as always. Ashton Irwin is an extremely talented and unique drummer, and he definitely didn't get as much credit as he probably should have. Yeah, maybe he's not doing the most complicated drum lines in the background, but he really shouldn't be. He should just be doing his job and then excelling in places where you want to hear some really cool drum work. And that's exactly what he's doing 10 times over on every single track. Also, the singing is great. Every single person trades off vocals all the time. It's one of my favorite Five Sauce-isms. You never hear music in this genre with multiple singers on the same record. At most, you get 2, like with Blink-182. But you get 3 to 4 on any given track. Throughout this entire thing, it keeps the sound very fresh and energetic, and it keeps you interested. You can't wait to hear what they're going to do next with the song, because it's truly unpredictable. Once we get to track 8, the album does its first real shift, its first real change, and we get into a very kind of repetitive, sleepy, atmospheric, moody track called Waste the Night. I'll be completely transparent with you guys. I fucking hated Waste the Night when I first heard the album. I thought it was so bad, and it was indicative of them trying to please like a pop audience. But in retrospect, like it fits perfectly within the album. It comes in right when you think things are just gonna chug along at the same BPM for the rest of the hour. But no, it really changes things up, and it makes it a better album. And it's a great song. It's amazing live too. They really go for it in the vocal category. I especially love Michael's vocals on this track. He has such a unique, I guess you should say, accent or unique quality to his vocals that gives him an edge in this sort of genre. You can clearly tell that's the reason why they leaned on his vocals a lot more than they usually do before and after on this album, because his voice is really suited to this sound. I'm doing the music reviewer thing, where I praise Ashton's drumming and I praise Michael's vocals. That seems to be like the two big things people said about this album at the time, was that like, love Michael's vocals, love Ashton's drumming, and then they didn't say anything else. I just love Callum's vocals on this entire album. I don't understand people who said he was too nasally. His voice is perfect for this record. That's also why they lean on him a lot more. I was surprised at how much you don't actually hear Luke sing. He has around an equal amount of vocal time to the other two. And of course, Ashton isn't allowed to get as many singing moments in because a lot of these songs are built to be performed live, and it's really hard to sing and drum at the same time. So, they don't give him as much. He does get a full verse on Safety Pin, however. I think Safety Pin is a great song. I love it, although I hate that weird, hey they put in the verses.
We're the long-lost children running.
It still wigs me out every time, but the way that the song builds up in crescendos is genius. Truly genius. And it's clear that they structured it as a song they knew they were not going to play live, considering they gave Ashton a full verse. But yeah, good song. Good deep cut. Again, it's just a fun listen all the way through. And I understand if people think that this is like a bit too corny of an album, a bit too cheesy, maybe even a bit too repetitive. I don't think that. But then again, I have listened to this thing probably more than I've heard my mother's own voice. So, honestly, the transition from Waste the Night into Vapor, which is another great track, without the interlude is great. So I don't know why they felt the need to add it in. And if you're going to do interludes, I would much prefer them be their own separate tracks on the album. So you listen to it when you listen to the album, but then when you take the song and listen to it in its own playlist, it doesn't have the interlude attached to it. I would much prefer that. Also, when I'm making a burned CD of the album to give to my friends, I can just fucking delete it and not have to worry about it. Speaking of songs that I usually delete when I make a burned copy of this album, that's a very harsh way to start talking about a song. I really am not a fan of the song Broken Home. I understand the point of it. They talk about it in the Rolling Stone article, which we're going to get to. The writing is so direct and so painfully sentimental that it just feels really preachy, and it's just such a bad song, and it doesn't need to be on the record. It really doesn't. It also kind of ruins the flow and the momentum of the album. Going from The Girl Who Cries Wolf to Broken Home, then to Fly Away, doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I know the point of Fly Away is that it's supposed to be this huge shot of adrenaline after kind of a slower part of the album, and it brings you back into that pop-punk sentiment after the kind of pop and then sad breaks of songs. But you don't need Broken Home to do that for you. I feel like just going straight from The Girl Who Cried Wolf into Fly Away works perfectly fine. Broken Home doesn't need to be on the album, and I never listened to the album with Broken Home on it. I hope that's not like a bad thing. I hope, that's not offensive or anything. Trust me, I don't come from a stellar background. You could describe my family situation as a broken home, and this song just feels sterile and annoying to me. I much prefer all of the emotional moments on literally any other track on this album than I do with that one. So I just throw it in the bin every time. I'm sorry. We don't need to listen to it, okay? I know what they were trying to do, but that's where their naivete really comes across on the record for me. And, that is going to dock at some points, even though, again, in my personal life, I don't interact with it. But when talking about a review, I have to mention it. Fly Away is a great track on the album and gives it another boost of momentum, so you can, really trudge your way on through the rest of it. And it was actually released as a promotional single, so it did chart on the Billboard Hot 100 at number 100 and then immediately went away. But still, that's kind of cool. It is pretty much locked in the tradition of the genre. So if you're really into that sound, it works pretty well. You can add it to your playlist or whatever. But I know a lot of critics at the time were upset about just how formulaic it sounded. What I can really say about Five Sauce is that even though they do crib a lot of style, they're at least putting their own unique spin on it or bringing their own personality to it and not being lazy. Like, none of these songs feel lazy in the way that they copy other bands. It just genuinely feels like an appreciation of the art form. I guess pastiche would be the real word. If copyright law wasn't so murky as it was these days, I don't think anyone would fucking care, really. To follow up Fly Away with Invisible is... Invisible is a pretty slow track, and it is exclusively sung by Callum. And, I mean, like, it is just so much more emotionally resonant and impactful than a song like Broken Home could ever be. The fact that they're, like, so close to each other in the runtime really just proves how much that song doesn't need to be on the album. The details of the track can really be up to interpretation, but a lot of it does seem to come from personal experience and, you know, internal sorrow. And in that way, I think it really does portray the kind of multi-layered complexities that are going on in this album. Yeah, there's some fun-loving kind of douchey crap at the top, but then as we go on, you really start to peel back the layers of partying and having fun and breakups to just see a true emotional core of, like, that sounds really bad. Like, I feel really bad and I'm concerned. But in the best way possible. If there's one thing you can do with your music, it is portray feelings that are very uncomfortable to say out loud, like in an interview or something. So, great track. Glad they wrote it. Glad they put it on the album. I love Callum's vocals, and they work perfectly on this track. Over the past 5 years or so, I've really grown to appreciate 2 tracks on this album. And those tracks are Airplanes and San Francisco. Again, kind of pairing them, oh my gosh, this fucking hair is gonna be the death of me, man. Kind of like I said earlier, a lot of these songs work in pairs or in groups of the album, and they kind of transition smoothly between one another, or in some cases, on purpose, jarringly between one another. So like the first 5 tracks are like what you know about Five Sauce. They are pretty much just a slightly more modern sounding version of the previous record. But then when we go on from tracks 6 to 11, we get a lot more pop sentiment, and in a way that is very still kind of moody and still, you know, very guitar driven, but definitely more pop sentiment. I mean, they still know how to write a sticky hook, and so no matter what genre they're doing on any of these tracks, there's gonna be some catchy lyrics and melodies. But specifically songs like Wakes the Night and Vapor use classic anthemic pop sound structures to make them feel very, very large and ready for, you know, performing live. When they kick into halftime for the chorus, it's so good. They also do it for Safety Pin, and it's one of my favorite things. It's like such a cheat code to like getting the chorus to feel much bigger. Is, you know, you're chugging along at a normal pace and then you switch into halftime. It's just, or you do the opposite. You go into double time. Yeah, anyways. Catch Fire is what transitions us from like the normal Five Sauce fare into the more pop side. And then it is Castaway which transitions us from the more pop side into the sad shit. And then we get that whole block of just depressing stuff, with Fly Away kind of wedged in there in the middle, which can seem a bit awkward, especially with a fucking Broken Home in there. But I'm just going to assume the goal of doing that was to provide like an example of how mood swings can kind of throw you back and forth. You can go from like being really optimistic and ready to face the world to being sad as shit just the next day. Something I completely forgot to mention is that I was only talking about the deluxe edition of this album, so that means there are around 3 or 4 songs interspaced throughout the album that are not on the standard edition. However, Five Sauce always only released the deluxe editions of their albums on streaming, so I figured most people would be listening to this music on streaming anyways, and then plus the CD version that I have is like a super deluxe version that has 2 extra songs tacked on at the very end. So apologies for me dogging on Broken Home so much. It really is unnecessary to compare it to the other songs. And it is a deluxe track along with The Girl Who Cried Wolf. Safety Pin is also a deluxe track, by the way. But then after Invisible, it looks so weird not having the front, because I'm looking at the track list on the back. The last 3 songs on this album are truly a transformative experience. Airplanes has become one of my favorite Five Sauce songs of all time. It is just genuinely such a fun time and so up my alley. Like, did they write that song for me specifically? That's like the only time I've ever really felt that about like a Five Sauce song. I'm like, oh, they did that for me. For me. Michael and Luke vocals, there's a guitar solo. It's in 3/4. How did they know I love 3/4 time signatures so much? Truly just genius songwriting. It is so optimistic and hopeful. It like really picks you up after all the sad shit. And I mean, it's called Airplanes, so it has this very airy kind of piano line at the beginning, and it does feel very, very much like up in the clouds. Same thing for San Francisco, which just has the most beautiful harmonies on it. Like, I am just forever amazed at how well they're able to harmonize with each other. Is it true that, like, if you have a deep bond with somebody, when you do vocal harmonies together, they just sound better? Like, your souls connect or something? Their harmonies with each other are just phenomenal. And I'm just assuming it's because they know how to work with each other and work with each other's vocals and just create something truly beautiful. You should really check out them perform this song acoustic live in San Francisco for Sounds Live Feels Live. It is such a beautiful performance. It really is. Before we get into the big one, the 2 songs I only kind of breezed over that I should talk more about are Permanent Vacation and Jet Black Heart. Permanent Vacation is one of those swing beat tracks that's supposed to be like the dance number, and it's very fun, but in the same way that I've overread into Money, I'm going to overread into Permanent Vacation. And I know the boys are probably just farting out a random song because they needed to fill a whole album's worth of stuff, but it's my song now. When you release something into the public, it becomes up to their own interpretation. You can't dictate what I can feel about the song. So it's my song now, and I say it has more meaning than you ever thought it could. Although I do think this one is supposed to be a little bit more of a somber one. The verses talk about being so depressed that you can't even get out of bed and feeling numb and like really kind of struggling. And so do the choruses with the phrases like frustration, desperation, and medication. So when they talk about living in a permanent vacation, it doesn't sound like a woo, we're in a band and we have fun all the time. It's like a permanent vacation. It's like, I have so much crippling depression that I can't get out of bed. This is a permanent vacation, like a permanent absence of being productive and feeling like you're living a quality of life. That's what I interpreted from the song. And then the Billy Joe Armstrong ripoff, kind of shouty bridge, I think kind of adds layers onto this idea of like being frustrated and doom scrolling on your phone for hours at a time and just like being a crotchety old man complaining about how bad the system is or whatever. Like, how much are you going to do about the system sitting in your bed looking at Twitter, right? So I think that's why the song, I think that's the point of the song being so upbeat, is that, like, you're supposed to, like, turn this kind of sad idea of permanent vacation into a happy one. With a dance beat, Jet Black Heart is such a standout track on the album. It's so good that it's placed so early on, because I think it wins people over after a few songs that people might not consider the best if you're not into Five Sauce or this sound. I mean, if you're like not into Hawthorne Heights at all, then this probably isn't going to do much for you either. But I think playing into that kind of classic 2000s emo really helps the critics, feel good about listening for them, I guess. I don't know. The lyrics are so poignant and overdramatic. It's so kind of silly almost how dramatic the song is. I mean, the whole chorus is just amazing. It's like the kind of shit you want to hear from some sad teenagers. 'Cause I've got a jet black heart and there's a hurricane underneath it trying to keep us apart. I write with a poison pen, but these chemicals moving between us are the reason to start again. The sonic palette of the song is just so unique and interesting, and is actually something they will play a lot on in the future, which you wouldn't really expect considering the album we have coming up next. But it really is a sound they kind of root themselves in and really start to expand upon in a slightly different, way, of course, in the later albums. But it's still like this is like a reference point for Five Sauce to like look out for. So I think it's time to get into the big song of the album closer, which is a genuine magnum opus for the band. I'm of course talking about Outer Space / Carry On. So it feels like for the past 4 years now, because it's only been around 4 years that I've actually felt like I've understood this song. For those past 4 years, I have been trying to think of a way to articulate my feelings on what I think this song is about. I have so many thoughts and opinions and feelings on this track, and I don't even know where to start. I guess we'll just start with the first lyrics. I can still taste the ocean like it was today. You said please keep on holding your hand in the rain, it came too soon. I will wait for you to love me again. It's like a poetic way of saying you were holding on to something, trying to keep holding on to it, but then you lost it. And now you're waiting to get it back. I guess I was running from something. I was running back to you. Lost here in London with nothing. I'm still running back to you. If you could love me again, I could let go of everything. It could just be your standard love song about somebody leaving from your grasp and hoping you can find them again. And with specific references to London, that can just be like small details within the actual relationship and not much else. However, I truly think this song is about nostalgia for a past time, which is really sad to think about when you think that they were only in their early 20s and they were already starting to miss the younger days of their lives. The hopeful nostalgia and innocence of the past, I think, is what they're yearning for here. And you could even relate it to a romantic relationship of sorts. Like you're romanticizing the past version of you and kind of wishing you can rekindle that relationship you had with yourself. The specific phrasing of lost here in London with nothing, I'm still running back to you, make me think of when they moved to London in 2012. That was the real moment they kind of threw away their childhood innocence and became like working citizens at age 15, 16. Like if I could learn to love myself again, I could let go of all of my current baggage. Like, things are just too fucking complicated right now. I want to go back.
We have to go back!
The next verse starts with, if I was an island in search of castaways, then maybe I'd find you, your hand, and the rain it came too soon, I will wait for you to love me again. So if we're going with my interpretation that it could be about a loved one, or it could be about one's past self, the idea of going to kind of rescue your past self with the knowledge you know now while still wanting to be them again is such a complicated emotion that was so eloquently and perfectly like portrayed in just that stanza, honestly. Maybe I should have mentioned this earlier in the video, but I am currently an English major in college, so like this is literally what I do full time in class, except with, you know, Robert Herrick or John Donne or Shakespeare, but no. In this classroom, we do it with 5 sauce, okay? I always joke that the whole reason why I went to college is so I can apply, like, real rhetorical and critical theory to shit that no one cares about. But anyways, after that verse, we just get the chorus again, and then we get this wonderful refrain with the phrase, the darkest night never felt so bright with you by my side. Again, the idea of, you know, having that feeling of your old self, feeling like your old self again, makes the dark nights feel bright. Like Batman Dark Knight, like Christian Bale, you know? And then here comes the line that shakes me so much to my core that I pretty much cry every time I hear it, but I'm not going to cry in this video. It would be silly to cry in the 5 sauce video. Nothing like the rain, when you're in outer space, when you're in outer space. And then that repeats, and then we get, love me like you did, I'll give you anything, I'll give you anything. The phrase, nothing like the rain when you're in outer space, is so eloquent. It kind of like shocks me. Because, remind you, how this album opened was my girlfriend's bitching because I always sleep in. I see the imagery of being in outer space as, you know, being a big celebrity to where you get so far removed from quote-unquote everyday life that you feel like you're, you know, thousands of light years away from planet Earth. And when you're up there, yes, it's beautiful. You're with the stars, literally and metaphorically. But you start to miss things like the rain, things that are very small and insular and can even be seen as a burden to everyday people, but are things you don't get to experience anymore and that you miss because it means that you've lost a sense of your own self and a sense of your own human understanding. That just really hits me, man. I can't. It hurts. It hurts deep in here. That's where I feel that line. Deep, deep in my soul. It kind of makes me speculate that if they had more time, maybe, to work on the album than just 3 months, maybe they would have leaned more into this side of things. But then after that, we get 1 minute of rain sounds to help you study/sleep. And after that, we get the song Carry On. I've never seen them as separate songs. They're all just one song to me. So... But this is the Carry On section of the song, and that was the Outer Space section. So it starts with, let the good times roll, sail on, let your path unfold. It won't be long, it won't be long. You know it's gonna get better. You know it's gonna get better. So it's a very hopeful refrain after all of the yearning of the previous section of the song. Then we have, say a prayer for the broken bones, 'cause who cares? We're all going home, and it won't be long. You know it's going to get better. Being done with all of the chaos that's been happening and finally getting a moment of rest and feeling very good about that. Like sending off the past pains to then have a moment of quietness or rest, which is what I associate when I think of the word home, especially in the context of their very heavy, chaotic lives. And being able to go home, as in the sleepy suburbia of Western Sydney. I got 1 foot in the golden life, 1 foot in the gutter, so close to the other side, so far from the wonder. I got 1 foot in the golden life, 1 foot in the gutter, so sick of the tug of war that keeps pulling me under. There's a reason why I used that specific phrase earlier on in the video, and that's because that is an extremely well-written encapsulation of what Five Sauce were going through at the time, and what I, as a fan, in retrospect, and even at the time, could see and realized within them. So the fact that they were self-aware of that and reflecting on it in a song is just beautiful to see. This is what you want out of music, or at least this is what I want out of my own music, is to see this kind of close reading, deep self-introspection and thought, and just amazing conception as well when it comes to my ears. I love listening to this song. I will always listen to it when it comes on in shuffle or just when it's casually thrown somewhere. It's so fucking good. Because that can describe so much about the members of this band and the current cultural spot they were wedged within, and just so many other things that it is so relatable on so many different levels that it kind of gets to me, in a way that I don't really understand about myself yet. That's something I need to talk about with a therapist or something, I don't know. So close to the other side, so far from the wonder. So sick of the tug of war that keeps pulling me under. This can describe how they constantly kept having to play both the alternative scenes and the pop scenes, how they had to be an edgy rock and roll band, but also a cute and cuddly boy band, how they were still young teenagers, yet still grown up enough to make really important life-altering decisions for themselves on the daily. And then we finally end the song with, let the good times roll, which is repeated, and then carry on, outlast the ignorance, moving on, survive the innocence, it won't be long. You know it's going to get better. Outlast the ignorance, survive the innocence. It won't be long. You know it's going to get better. Now, is that rephrase of it won't be long, you know it's going to get better, just to close out the album with a very, hopeful note? Or is including it won't be long immediately after the phrase survive the innocence imply that your innocence is going to leave very soon, but it still will get better? I think replacing that line in context with the previous one adds a lot more meaning and complexity to it. The phrase outlast the ignorance really speaks to what I think a lot of what was going on with them at the time. And it is such a great way of like talking about the critics, if that's what it is about. That's how I personally interpret it. While still not being corny as hell. I don't know about you guys, but I fucking hate it when music gets into like the nitty gritty of the behind the scenes and the critics. It just feels like creative bankruptcy. Like you're out of ideas, so you start writing about what's just right fucking in front of you. And this is a thought I've kind of always felt, but that is also a Todd in the Shadows opinion. So, you know, credit to him for like wording it in the way that I would have wanted to word it. I basically just quoted him right there. So to have it just be one line and have it not even need to mean that, as in the ignorance of people who don't care to listen to their music because of superficial reasons, or just the people that they were surrounding themselves with, like their management, their record label, their agents, telling them they need to do all these things, and that if they can just outlast it and get better and move on, carry on, if you will, then it'll all be all right. To interpret that in 2024, when, you know, you could even say things are all right, is very wonderful and beautiful, and I'm very glad we got to do this together. So thank you for sitting through this really extended period of the video where I just analyzed all the lyrics of a 6-minute song. Who said attention spans were dead? Am I right? I really hate my fridge. And by the looks of it, my fridge hates me. So Sounds Good Feels Good did pretty well, considering what it is. It went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 200, which means they were one of the first ever bands to have 2 consecutive #1 hit albums, and they would continue that with their next one as well, if you're wondering. So the fans really were here for this thing, and they really, really appreciated it. But it was radio silence. Literally. Like, they didn't get much radio play. I mean, I did hear She's Kinda Hot occasionally, but that was just like a miracle, honestly. I never heard Hey Everybody outside of my own personal listening. I'm pretty sure Jet Black Heart was the next single. It at least got its own video. And, I mean, that one maybe could have gotten some alternative play, but I have no way of finding out whether that's true or not. Same thing with, like, the promotional singles. I think Jet Black Heart was released as a promotional single first before getting the video. I do remember them releasing it, you know, as like a single and putting it on their website, and I listened to it on my phone while walking to school, and it was extremely rainy outside, so I was like walking around in like this very gray, dark, dreary atmosphere while listening to Jet Black Heart for the first time. It was honestly the best first listening experience I could have ever asked for. So I hope this was an interesting and balanced take on the album Sounds Good Feels Good. Again, like I said, I'm very biased in the sense that like this album literally was my life for the entirety of 2016. So there's only so much non-bias that I can apply. But I really hope you enjoyed my analysis, because this is like something I truly feel deep about. The one thing I was concerned about with the previous section was that I felt like I wasn't talking about the music as much, but that's purely just because how much is there to really unpack with a lot of the songs they wrote before Sounds Good Feels Good? There really isn't much at the end of the day. The lyrics are very straightforward and simple to the point. Yes, the songs are catchy. Yes, there's a lot of interesting riffs, but they hadn't reached the point where they could do something on the level of this album. And so I'm glad that I'm able to prove that I do care about the more detailed elements of the albums. And as we go forward, they're just going to get even more interesting and even more complex. So that'll be fun to look into. You may think I'm done with the video because I'm like in like outro voice, but I'm not, because we still have one very big, very serious thing we need to tackle. Among other things, I hope it was worth it, guys. I hope this has been all worth it, because it doesn't feel like it in the moment. So, let's talk about the Rolling Stone article. We're finally here. The big thing I've been waiting to talk about for what feels like my entire life now. Ever since the conception of this video, I've been delaying and fretting over this exact topic, and today we're just going to rip off the band-aid and really get into it. So, the Rolling Stone article, which was published in December of 2015, is one of the big dividing points in the history of Five Sauce as a whole, in my opinion. Everything we talk about in context revolves around what happened before this article, and then what happened after. Like BRS and ARS, I guess. And it's extremely controversial, if you couldn't tell. You couldn't make something like this without causing some conflict, so let's just get into why that is. No more preamble, like I love so much, we're just going to start talking about it. So I think the most obvious thing we can all see in this article is just how badly the band is portrayed in it. They sound like extremely douchey, sex-crazed druggies, which they probably actually were at the time because of the reasons I said earlier. In retrospect, it is so obvious just how clear it all is now. This was supposed to be their hard swerve into adulthood, their full lean into debauchery, and the whole world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The only problem is that no one thinks that's cool anymore. We all read The Dirt, and if you haven't yet, you really should, because it'll make you never want to be like Motley Crue ever in your life, because holy shit were they bad people. It's so obvious to me that the management team freaked out when Five Sauce turned in a completely uncommercial record with Sounds Good Feels Good, and tried to market them as an active car crash to cash in on navel gazing alone. And that album isn't uncommercial because it's too edgy or too bad. It sounds like Blink-182 in their most sellout of eras, and I hope I've already proved by now that I really like the album, so don't take that too harshly. It's uncommercial because it has no real pop hits on it, and it was kind of designed to be that way. Like I said earlier, you could already see that tropical EDM was the next big sound of summer bangers, which was definitely not the Offspring 1990s dude bro pop punk pastiches, which was the kind of music they were making at this point. So the Rolling Stone article starts to make more sense when you look at it that way. A quick way to gain attention, negative or not, to try and move more product as stock in Five Sauce inevitably starts to crash once people actually hear the thing and find out it sounds nothing like Lean On and toss it into the used CD bin. Now, I really love the actual cover. I feel like if you're going to be put on the cover of Rolling Stone, you should definitely go big or go home, and they definitely went big. Nothing says big like having the dogs out for Rolling Stone, am I right? I know the idea of the photo shoot was that they were stripping themselves down to just their lyrical material and highlighting the subject matter of the music more than anything else, and I think that's a really great message. I mean, that's why I have a poster of it in my room in the background of all my videos, which was a completely accident, by the way. I meant to make this topic my first ever YouTube video, which is why I wanted the poster in my background, but as I just kept pushing it further back in my schedule and making more videos with the original setup I made for the topic, it just became like a funny running joke for me, and I fear I may have alienated a few people by, having these naked guys in the background of all my videos, so I apologize for that. Even though I see and like the meaning of the cover, that doesn't mean I'm not fully aware of the fact of them being butt naked was still the main appeal and was obviously going to be sensationalized. It's not their fault all the tabloid websites praise them for being hot and edgy while simultaneously bashing women who are doing a lot less. I don't blame people for getting mad about that at all. If these websites are going to be against nudity, then it has to go both ways, or else it's just misogynistic. Speaking of misogyny, we have to get into the actual subject matter of the article. This is the main thing I've been dreading for literal years now. I've spent so much of my life, it feels like, trying to figure out all of my personal opinions on this, so I'm going to try and explain all my thoughts without just exploding into a pile of cartoon dust by the end of it. So forgive me if I don't sound as eloquent as I usually do in these things. I'm really going through a lot. Another good interview to compare with this one is the live interview they did with Howard Stern, which came out within the same month that this article was apparently written in, according to the journalist's tweets, that is. The only real problem with me recommending this interview is that it is extremely hard to find. The week that this interview happened, I was able to find a YouTube upload of the thing slowed down and in such low quality that it sounded borderline unintelligible, and that upload was taken down within the hour. I have now found a semi-decent copy online, but I risk my entire channel being deleted if I play clips from it in this video, so I'm just going to read out what they say when I want to quote exact parts from it. I'm also not going to play any footage of the interview that was uploaded to Howard Stern's official YouTube channel for the same reason, but feel free to check out those videos if you're interested. So, with both of these interviews being held within the same time frame of their lives, and I will say that in the Howard Stern interview, they definitely sound a lot more like balanced individuals rather than punk edit bad boy Wattpad characters. I'm just not feeling a lot of the writing in the Rolling Stone article, I'm sorry. I do believe all of what the article states about the band, but a lot of the pros just tick me off for a reason I haven't quite picked up on yet. Maybe this is just my dormant 5 Sauce stand coming out to bash this thing for no reason, but so much of this reads like it's supposed to hype up the band, but accidentally comes across as a smear campaign when it really shouldn't. Everything that's supposed to be cool and aspirational comes across as embarrassing to me. Maybe this interviewer had the same attitude as I do and finds all of this extremely lame, but had to spin a positive light on it to keep his job. This is all speculation, of course. I have no way of telling how the author of this article actually feels about 5 Sauce. A vicious rumor that was spread around at the time pushed the notion that the guy had a personal vendetta against the boys and tried to make them look bad. In my opinion, they did a good enough job of doing that for themselves, and maybe the interview just didn't try to sugarcoat it in the way a true ass-kisser would've. The California sun is low in the sky over Bel Air, but at 5 seconds of Summer's house, the day has yet to begin. There are red wine stains on the floorboards by the pool on the canyon-side deck, which overlooks the Chateau de Fleurs, a $100 million mansion that's been on the market since it was built, and the Pacific Ocean in the distance. A fireplace is surrounded by empty beer bottles. They should be up soon, says the band's English assistant, Zoe, who reads a book while we wait. She occasionally tries texting the band in favor of knocking on bedroom doors. Nobody responds. However, compared to Howard Stern, these guys seem like fucking Mother Teresa. Stern is notoriously a bad person and a pot stirrer of an interviewer, so they seem like good wholesome boys as they try to course correct the conversation to literally anything else other than banging models and doing hard drugs. Is the best part of getting famous and really having the kind of monumental success you have? Is it the women or is it the money? Which is better? Or is it both? Honestly, I'm gonna sound like an asshole, but I think it's actually just playing music. You love it. It sounds like I'm not being genuine, but I'm serious. Like, having music you've actually written, yeah. And have people, like, it sounds really weird, but sometimes I'll just, like, look up songs that we wrote, and I love to see what people say about it, you know? It's exciting for you? Yeah. Also, the fact that both of these interviews hit on a lot of the exact same points make me think that their management had a list of topics for them to hit on to push the rock star narrative more. Here's a list of what I personally picked up on. 1. Callum's leaked nudes. 2. Michael's depression. 3. Having sex with models / groupie culture. 4. Just how much these boys drink and how they do not care they are not old enough to do so in the US. And 5. They are not a boy band. Oh my god, don't you dare call them a boy band. Trying to tackle this row of subject matter is making my left eye start to twitch, so I'm very sorry if I lose my composure. First of all, it's so gross that they bring up Callum's leaked nudes since he was a minor when those videos were taken, which means that it was a long-ass time ago and not even relevant anymore. It's so old news, and it's clearly only being rehashed because it fits the narrative of them being edgy bad boys who take dick pics. Also, he probably sent it to a fan, which is awful to think about, and is exploiting his fame in such a weird way, just ew. Second of all, Michael's depression is talked about in the most patronizing and disgusting way possible. It's so clear that these interviews were done way before the conversation surrounding mental health was more normalized, since they treat Michael going to therapy as if he's being thrown into a padded cell in a straitjacket. Howard Stern uses the worst language one can possibly use when discussing therapy and depression, and the Rolling Stone article treats it like a silly quirk that he has, like just another part of his personality, no different than his dyed hair and piercings. In so much of this article, it's clear that they aren't really doing well, and they all clearly need help. Yet for some reason it seems to be romanticized. I guess spoiler alert for the future, but they do eventually get better and are able to reflect on this time in their life with remorse, regret, and eventually acceptance. But for the time being, we have to see them flounder their way through a live radio morning show interview where they try to pretend they don't have groupies. Again, more speculation on my part. I personally have no real proof if they had sex with female fans, mainly because I'd rather peel off my own eyelids than do research into that kind of thing. But the people who have done the research into that kind of thing confirmed a lot of suspicion in retrospect. I will not talk about Acacia Brindley in this video. I will not. In my opinion, the most telling moment in the Stern interview is when Ashton tries to explain a relationship he was in and why it ended. I will not try and decipher who this girl is. Do that for yourself, you weirdos. And Howard Stern totally embarrasses him and Michael has to try and save face. So no one has a serious relationship going on at all? I actually tried. I tried to have a relationship and it just didn't work out. I've been away for 6 months. It can't work out, right? Well, I was kind of seeing someone for about a year, but I worked it out, and I'd actually only been with them for approximately 2 months out of that year. Was she a model? She does do stuff like that, yes. That's, exactly. She does do stuff like that. Is there anything better than having sex with a model? Oh, man. I never have. You never have? No. What's the matter with you? Sex with a model is just sex. Whoa. You better go to that psychiatrist. You better work that out. You gotta get a model. What's going on? Really classy, Stern indeed. The Rolling Stone article is somehow worse, with this all-time classic quote being joked to death when the article dropped. Hemmings says they took full advantage of the attention. They were their wildest on their early tours, when they'd go to bars and mingle with fans after shows. When you put 4 young dudes on a tour bus, playing theaters, then arenas, you're gonna have sex with a lot of girls, I guess, says Hemmings. We had a good time. Multiple girls in one night? I feel like I shouldn't say, he says with a smirk. You could say the possibility of that is high. Multiple girls at the same time? The possibility is high, he says again. He cracks a devilish grin. I'm sorry. The possibilities are endless. I'm sorry. The article starts with the interviewer describing how he had to wait hours for everyone to wake up, and when they finally did crawl out of their bedrooms, they're all hungover and not wearing pants. So that's the energy of the interview when this quote is supposed to be from. Luke fully has a girlfriend at this point in time, by the way. They're nice enough to include the most douchey paparazzi picture to ever exist of Luke and Arzelia, who I was hoping not to have to mention in this video for everyone's own sake, but the article was tasteless enough to have a full paragraph dedicated to her when they were only dating for 3 months, so I guess I'm just stooping down to its level now. They make her sound like an airhead influencer and Luke like a former mysterious genius who's only hanging out with the stupids because he's too drugged out to care. Only around 1/3 of that statement is probably true, and I'm gonna let you guess which part that is, just for fun. Either way, it feels defamatory, even though it most likely isn't. And don't even get me started on their drinking problems. A running joke I have with my friends is that in the year 2015 alone, Michael Clifford was spotted hanging out with all sorts of different celebrities, and not in one photo does he look in any way not inebriated to all hell. It's clear that they were partying really hard at this time, and even though they deny doing any other types of hard drugs when Howard Stern asks, the lyrics of songs made just 5 years later would beg to differ. Maybe they were only into the weak shit at this point and only started spiraling further once they took their extended break. It's wild to see them front this hard when it comes to substance abuse. I think what ended up sounding the worst to the fans, besides the god-awful possibilities are endless line, was their perspective on being called a boy band. Jesus Christ, here we go. One of the most enlightening things for me was this section where they interview their old manager Andrew, who talks about how they originally decided to market 5 Sauce and make them a huge success. After meeting with the band and Hemmings' mom, Wilkinson wrote up a 12-month plan for 5 Sauce to become a pop juggernaut. He starts reading a marketing strategy he presented to the band. Musically, 5 Sauce can occupy the space between One Direction and guitar-playing UK boy band McFly. They are young, attractive, attainable teenagers that have a cheekier edge and play their own instruments. While they cannot cross into the realm of pop-punk, they can stand on the sidelines and capture the end of that market. They always wanted to be Blink-182 or Good Charlotte, but I'll be the first to admit that I thought that was shooting too far, says Wilkinson. We tried to make them a little more pop. This is what I mean when I say it feels like the interviewer is trying their best to spin the narrative with the material he's been given, but the weave just falls apart when any sort of logic is added in. How does exposing them as wannabe pop punkers whose management thought they were too lightweight for the big leagues not make them look like anything other than egotistical posers? Also, shouldn't this article be about music? Or is the cover's meaning just completely detached from what the article's actually about? Sometimes I really feel like I'm losing my mind over here. The worst it gets is when they finally stop dancing around the topic like they do in most interviews and just get right to it. Their whole ethos as a band was just how close of a relationship they had with their fans and how they'd never let a stone be unturned in the creation of everything that they did. So to hear that they may have been quietly holding resentment for their primarily female fan base was the last straw for a lot of people. They could have gone the traditional rock band route, you know. No one forced them to tour with One Direction. They wanted to be the biggest band in the whole world. And I've seen time and time again that female fans will get you there. My personal theory, so you can disagree with this if you want, is that they went through a phase where they were at their most debaucherous and they wished to be taken seriously in the rock world, to be a real Warped Tour band like they always dreamed of. That One Direction cosign gave them a lot more success than they could have ever dreamed of, but it came at the cost of their street cred and authenticity in rock spaces. So if they were feeling bitter about that from ages 9 to 21, I guess I can understand. I'm just glad that in the future they're able to make jokes about this obvious contradiction they had in the press regarding this subject.
Now, would you guys say you're a boy band or a real band?
We don't mind. Call us whatever you want. It's about the music.
Love that attitude.
Yeah.
So, as a boy band...
What the fuck?
What did you call us?
Are you kidding my ass?
Again.
You think we're a fucking boy band?
A boy band.
Over the years, the boys have done little to nothing to try and explain their portrayal in this article, which I think speaks louder than any Notes app apology ever could. I have no proof of this, so call this another tinfoil hat conspiracy, but I heard from a few people that the Australian version of the article mainly talked about their music and lyrical material. So I can see how it would hurt if you talked about music for 80% of your interview, and then for 20% you talked about how Chad Kroeger was a creepy old man, and that smaller percentage is all that got published to the wider public. That Chad Kroeger bit is real, by the way. Read the article if you ever get the chance. They go on so many shit-talking sprees throughout the entire thing. Maybe they didn't realize just how off the cuff the article was going to lean on, or maybe they just didn't get enough media training and let their teenage assholery slip out. Or maybe they were just too hungover to care. Either way, they said all this shit and now it's forever immortalized for the rest of history to see. Although I'm pretty sure the wider public doesn't really care. Most people did not and have not recognized who these naked people are when they see the cringy poster in the background of my videos. So if they can live this down in their career, then I guess anything's possible. Maybe some things are just best to be left in the past. Ah!
Remember the words you told me, love me so the day I die. So give to me,